Michelangelo's Jeremiah, painted on the Sistine chapel ceiling in the Vatican, is a masterpiece that vividly captures the emotional and spiritual turmoil of one of the Hebrew Bible's most complex, most subjective prophets. In just a few minutes, let's use this video to dive into 4 or 5 fascinating details about this remarkable Renaissance fresco. First, look at Jeremiah's posture. He sits hunched over, his legs crossed, his head resting heavily in his right hand. Michelangelo emphasizes the prophet's emotional torment and exhaustion. This isn't just pensiveness. It's the weight of a prophetic mission that brought unrelenting personal suffering. Jeremiah participated in God's own suffering. His expression seems to convey sorrow, reflection, and resignation all at once, evoking the lamentations that define his character and God's character in the biblical text. Behind Jeremiah, flanking him, stand 2 smaller female figures. We think these probably represent the lost kingdoms of Israel, the northern kingdom, and Judah, the southern kingdom. Their presence underscores the profound loss that Jeremiah is lamenting, both a physical and a spiritual collapse of God's people and the covenant. These figures add depth to the fresco, connecting and visualizing the prophet's suffering, interlocking him with the suffering of his own people, the destruction of God's people and God's land. In the lecture by Dr. Jacob Weiss that we listened to, the professor noted the striking detail of Jeremiah's obscured mouth. He noted that especially when viewed from below, it's clear that the prophet's mouth is hidden completely behind his hand. What could this symbolize? Of course, it is a posture of melancholy, Jeremiah's thoughtfulness about the inutility of his prophetic work. His work mattered tremendously, but it was not pragmatic, since for decade after decade, 3 or 4 decades, God's people did not heed God's prophetic word through Jeremiah. In effect, Jeremiah's mouth was covered, it was muffled, and here is the second meaning of the hand gesture. Might there be yet a third meaning? In prophetic confessions, in Jeremiah's laments, such as the one in Jeremiah 20, we hear the prophet express subjectively his inner conflict. He longs to abandon his calling, to keep his mouth shut, but he cannot keep the word within. It burns within him like fire. Michelangelo capturing this dynamic, the prophet's inability to give voice to his anguish. Jeremiah, like all true visionaries and the best artists, keenly felt a disconnect between the world as he experienced it around him and the ideal, the transcendent, the sublime. He even felt a hypertrophy with God's own desire to have the sublime and the just come to earth. Jeremiah was oversympathetic with the divine anger at the disconnect and wanted it to come sooner than God was ready to allow it to come. God's patience with humankind was greater than Jeremiah's own. Michelangelo probably felt something of a deeply personal interconnection with Jeremiah along these lines. He knew the sublime, he had a sense of transcendent beauty, but it conflicted with his patrons, such as the Pope, and Michelangelo struggled with creative and spiritual burdens along these lines. Both Michelangelo and Jeremiah were bound to their callings, Jeremiah to God's message of judgment and Michelangelo to his artistic mission to communicate that which most people simply could not see. This connection likely influenced the intensity and introspection we see in Jeremiah's figure.